I'm delighted to welcome to the show today Julie Nicholls from Body Mind Coaching. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you for having me on the show.
So tell us about Body Mind Coaching. Why did you select that name, and what is Body Mind Coaching?
Body Mind Coaching is about helping people understand that there is a direct connection between their body and their mind. They're not two separate things. Medicine studies it as mental health and physical health, but it's one. We have one body, and the body, what's going on in the body, is a reflection of what is going on in the mind. And the coaching is what I do with my clients and in workshops to really educate people about that connection and what's happening with them and what they can do about it themselves, the self-care that they need to maintain a good balance and health in their body. And why I chose that is because I originally trained as a nurse and did my thesis on the psychology and cancer, and learnt more about that body-mind connection. And the World Health Organization has a definition of health, not as the absence of disease or disability, but a complete state of mental, physical, and social well-being. So it really does include all of it, but that's not how we tend to see health or medicine. So I then left nursing because it wasn't doing what I was hoping, and retrained in remedial massage, and then still wasn't getting the results I wanted. People were still coming back every month for treatment, and that's not getting people better. So I then learned something called the Trager Approach, which was much more about body-mind connection, psychophysical integration. And then learned something you may have heard of, which is EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Yeah. And more recently did something called integral eye movement. And that has a lot more around education and identity and how we get stuck in these patterns, these chronic patterns of behavior and also patterns of disease, and what's stopping it. And so I'm really loving helping people understand that and how that gets in the way of their health, their relationships, the chronic patterns in work where they leave one job because it's not very good, and they get into another job which turned out to be just the same, and so we have these chronic patterns that get us stuck.
Very interesting. There's an awful lot to talk about there, so that's fabulous. You mentioned something called the
Trager Approach. Yeah.
Trager. How are you spelling Trager? I've not heard of that.
Trager.
Trager. And what does that do?
It came over from America, from a gentleman called Milton Trager, and that really is about educating the mind through moving the body. And we are how we move. And I don't know if you've seen, there's a TED talk about how this gentleman taught his friend, he was doing research on the brain, and he taught his friend how to write the infinity sign and keep doing that. And that how it helped his friend who'd had a stroke, I think, to retrain his brain and get his brain connected. And he got much quicker recovery just through this simple physical movement, but how that was tapping into the brain. And Milton Trager developed movements. It's often seen as massage, but it's much more than that. Every movement that we do with the body is connecting to that holding pattern, that chronic pattern of behavior, of movement, and then how we unravel that and put a new pattern in. So you can't undo the past. If you've had a trauma and your body's got stuck, you can't take that away, but you can put something new over and over again, which then makes that old pattern obsolete. So the brain is neuroplastic. I'm sure you know that. So it can retrain itself. And so what we're doing is putting new movement in and understanding of, oh yes, this is the thing that I do. So when I'm driving and I'm worried about a lorry coming past, I shrug my shoulders. It's a defense mechanism. And once you spot, so part of it is the awareness, you've got to spot that that's happening. You can go, oh, my shoulders are up there again. I don't need that. I remember the feeling that you have on the couch or on the table with the practitioner and go, oh yeah, this is much more helpful for me. I can let my shoulders drop. This is what it felt like. So I can feel the weight of my elbows as I'm driving, and that switches off that pattern of being scared because you're now gone back into your body instead of your mind that's going, I'm scared. The body goes, oh, I'm in my elbows. I can feel the weight of my elbows. This is comfortable. I'm okay here. The truck has gone past. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's interesting that you use that analogy, because my daughter and I were talking about that exact same thing, getting squashed between two lorries on the motorway. And my daughter does a lot of driving, and I've done quite a bit of driving, and I had a long journey. And my son-in-law said, "Well, be careful of those lorries." But it's an instinct thing, isn't it? It's a natural instinct when you're in fear mode. You know, you go like this, don't you? You shrug your shoulders. Yeah, it's a natural instinct. But
that's because the trapezius muscle goes from the neck across the shoulders and down to the middle of the back, is fed by a cranial nerve, which are all the nerves that feed our emotions and go to the face. So you can tell if someone's sad, even if they're trying to hide it sometimes. Yeah. And that's because it's cranial nerve. So it's an emotional muscle. So the shoulders shrugging is a reflex. And the pattern we've got into is to think that a lot of the things that aren't dangerous have become dangerous. It's the fight, flight, and freeze reaction. So we think of it as a lion because it's life-threatening, and a lorry getting close to you can feel like that. And normally, once it's passed, you would relax. Oh, the lion's gone away. That's okay. But there's still more traffic. And so we've not learned that pattern of the threat's gone away. It's okay. I can relax, and I know what that feels like. And so
the body-mind connection, where the mind goes, the body follows, doesn't it? Which is what you just explained.
Yeah. And so we often don't know what that relaxed state actually feels like. Because I ask my clients, okay, so when you're in this situation, what are you experiencing? And they'll tell me they've got pain, they've got headaches, they've got back pain, they're suffering with their hip or their neck. They've got all these symptoms. They can describe it perfectly. The anxiety, they get dry mouth, their palms are sweating. I say, okay, so when you're relaxed, what does it feel like? And it's not sweaty. There's no pain, and there's no vocabulary. They haven't learnt vocabulary to be able to describe that sensation of relaxed. And so I take them through a process of doing one side of the body and say, now, what's that like? And they'll say, oh, well, that's relaxed. Okay, and now describe it to me. And they still got no words. I say, so what's the color? There's a bit like NLP. What's the color? What's the shape? What's the size? What's the texture? What's the temperature? And then they find the vocabulary. Oh, that's what it feels like. And have you ever eaten durian fruit?
Never heard of durian fruit. What is it?
It's the stink fruit.
No.
The one that really stinks. It's an Asian fruit, and it stinks, and so much so that it's forbidden on public transport in some countries. And I've had it, and it's actually quite sweet. But if I say, now, tell me what a lemon's like. If you eat a lemon, you might say you like it or you don't like it. It's quite sharp. It gives you a tingly feeling at the back of your mouth. It's refreshing. So you have vocabulary and your body has a memory of what that's like. And if I say bite into a lemon, you might find you start salivating or you're going, ooh, scrunching up your face. Yeah. So your body's got that memory. But if I say now, what's durian fruit like? If there's no memory there, you can't recall it. You can't tap into it. You can't even make it up. And even if I explain to you, well, it's sweet and it's a bit stringy, as if you were eating the outside of a kiwi, that still doesn't give you the idea of what it is. Relaxation is a feeling experience. You have to know and register that experience for your brain and your body to be able to reproduce it. So once they've got one side of their body done, they go, that's what it's like. Then I say, okay, now reproduce that on the other side. Copy the feeling and paste it. Or with people who are plumbers, I would say, okay, well, open the pipe and let that flow, that hot water or that whatever they've described, flow to the other side, as if you were siphoning out their system. With computer people early on, I would say, oh, do you use a computer? And I say, right, you know how to do copy and paste? And so the techie people in the 90s, I would say, oh, copy and paste. Now most people know how to do that. So then they've got something that they can use to reproduce that feeling.
Very clever.
But it takes that education.
Yeah, and you're using the language that people understand according to what's in their life. And that's very important, isn't it, to put things into context. Otherwise, people don't grasp it.
Yeah. And language is key to the whole thing. Using exactly the right words.
Listening to a podcast this morning about relationships, and they were talking about how we play ourselves down. We negatively talk about ourselves to ourselves, and it's one of the worst things that we can do, isn't it? Particularly if you've got ill health, you're continually in that negative vibe.
Yeah, and one of the patterns that I was talking about is catastrophizing. So, it was like that, and every time I go, every time I go out, I get a cold, or every time I go away on holiday, I fall ill. And so a bit like the law of attraction, that's the thing that you're expecting. So your body goes, oh yeah, I can do that. I know how to do that. So it will create it. That's already set in the mind. Your unconscious can only reproduce what you've set. It's the hard drive.
Yes.
It's the best computer we've got. But you have to put the right information in. And that comes from the conscious. Way I describe it to clients is for the older generation, they might remember an Amstrad computer, the first sort of home computers. And I started with an Amstrad. And all you had was black and white figures, letters and numbers. And that's what happens when you're a child. Everything is black and white. Everything that you're told, you believe. Because you don't have a critical mind. Your brain isn't developed until you're about 7, for some people about 10, to be able to make that judgment. Hence, Father Christmas exists and comes down the chimney, even if you don't have a chimney. Then when you're an adult, you've got an iPad. On there, you can put pictures, music, images, make phone calls, all kinds of fancy stuff. That's what you want as an adult. But you've still got the Amstrad program, like the virus, running that software. And all of those programs are stopping your iPad from creating the life that you want. Whether it's poor posture, which has come from a fear. So you're hunched over, not just over your keyboard, but when you're driving in life, because you're grieving. So lungs are connected to grieving, and so you've closed your chest off, and so you're not breathing. You're not wanting to be exposed because that's very vulnerable. So all of those patterns are set there. And then when people see you, that's what they're picking up. You don't know that consciously. You think, oh, yeah, I really know my job. But what they're seeing, what you're saying and what they're seeing is something different. And so there's a mismatch, and then people don't necessarily completely trust you, and you're not getting the business that you want. So all of those things get in the way. So I know it's very deep, very complicated, very simple, really.
Yeah. People overcomplicate things. I love your phrase, catastrophizing. I love that.
Yeah.
And it does describe exactly so many people that I come across. Like you say, they expect to have a cold, 2 or 3 times a year. They expect negative things to happen, and they over dramatize stuff. But I love the phrase catastrophizing. I'm gonna use that. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Tell us about EMDR.
Well, it started with Francine Shapiro, who realized she'd had some bad news, and she was walking through a park, and the sun was shining through the trees, and she realized at the end of her walk that she didn't feel quite so upset as when she started walking through the park. So luckily she was in psychology and did some research about the REM sleep pattern and how the eye movement. She noticed that her eyes were sort of flicking with the light. So she developed EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. That's why it's shortened to EMDR, because it's a bit of a mouthful. And worked with Vietnam War veterans and found it was getting results for people who hadn't got benefit from standard psychotherapy or counseling or art therapy. And actually, I'm currently reading a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And brilliant. It's a Dutch, I can't think of his name, but look for The Body Keeps the Score. And he talks about it in there. And I haven't got to that chapter yet. Mm-hmm. But he works with trauma and how there really is a shift that goes on in the body and the hormones and the structure of the brain when we have trauma. And we think of trauma as being war or a car accident, but actually it can be simple in a way as seeing your parents arguing night after night, having an alcoholic parent, not having somewhere stable as a home and having to move around all the time, and you're having to change friends for the military every 3 years or sometimes more. It can be things that are very subtle that we don't necessarily recognize as trauma, but they do traumatize the brain and the body. Again, it's not a separate thing. And that sits and it changes that structure permanently until there's the realization, and then you can start implementing ways of rewiring and reconnecting the body and the brain to work better in a way that we want. So getting rid of that virus, and the EMDR in a way makes that connection through the eye movements, because the eyes are not a separate organ that happens to see. It's an extension of the brain that happens to see. And have you come across Maya Schneider?
No.
He was registered blind, and used the Bates method partly to retrain his eyes to see, and was able to end up passing a driving test, even though the optician said you can't possibly see with these eyes.
Wow.
But he could read. And his book is My Life, My Vision, I think. And he also says that the dysfunction in the eyes are to do with the dysfunction in the brain. The fact that you don't have a vision, so you might not be able to see very far in the future. So you might just be able to see close up. Or if you can't see close up, you're not able to see the detail in what's going on, because you're just like the big picture. So you don't want to see close up because the detail might just be too painful to see. So there's this, the neuroscience is now showing, but it's been around for years, but we're only now getting the scientific evidence. But yet it's not very well connected. There's all these different branches. So like Schneider or EMDR that are doing this research, it's still their own separate fields as opposed to very integrated and understanding how all of this is working.
And that's the difficulty, isn't it? You have lots of specialist fields. You have specialist cancer, specialists for various different other diseases and conditions, and nobody talks to one another. They all go off in their specialist area, and then you end up, if you're on the allopathic route, people will have a tablet for this and a tablet for that, and before you know where you are, you're on 7, 8, 9 drugs every day, and often many more. And it's the interaction of those drugs that cause the problem, and people don't realise the connection between, well, I'm taking the drug to help me feel better, but I'm actually feeling worse. Yes, because the other drug you're taking for the other condition has a side effect, and it goes on and on. I see it all the time, and people just don't get it. And I don't understand why people don't understand.
Because they're not taught. And I trained in Belgium, and actually it was when I was seeing the side effect of the drugs, and the fact that one of the side effects for this drug that was meant to stop people who'd had operations feeling sick afterwards, the side effect was sickness. And I just couldn't believe it. And on my report, when I'd put this, all I got was a big question mark from the teacher. And I thought, they're not even checking this information. They don't even believe that what I've put is what's in the pharmaceutical dictionary. And that's when I thought, I can't do this. I can't do it to myself, let alone to patients. So that's why I thought I have to find another way. And also I'd gone in as a fit 18-year-old and came out verging on high blood pressure, had arch feet, bowed legs, and sciatic pain. And my mother found an osteopath, or I think he was an osteopath, and there I saw this, the whole structure of the brain and how your skull doesn't fuse. You can still move the plates of your brain, and how that makes a difference. I thought, wow, there is another way. And it's after that I thought, right, I need to find another route through, and happened to find this course on remedial massage and thought, oh, you mean to say I could be my own boss and run my own business? Yes, this is what I want to do. So that's how I got into massage, and then just carried on learning. I've never stopped learning one field or another that just crops up, and reading what's happening in the more recent research. So
fantastic. The number of people I interview for the show who do the same thing, the thousands of pounds that are spent on training, it's remarkable. People who want to help others, and the more you know, the more you need to know, and then you need to know more, and so it goes on. You're forever students, aren't we?
Yeah, but that keeps your brain active. That's always good.
Yes, keeps us young. So you went to train as a nurse, presumably so that you could help other people, but came out realizing that there's more to life than the medical profession.
But it gave me a really good basis and a good background, and I was very discerning of different therapies that I started to get into, and how I'm currently writing a blog about that, how easy it is for people who've got no training at all. They've got no anatomy, no physiology, can just set up as some practitioner dealing with really complicated issues. And it's actually doing people like myself a disservice, because people then think, they're quacks and they've got no training, and then they might be creating other problems. But because I trained in Belgium, as individuals, we are allowed to choose our doctor, because you pay for the doctor, and then you get refunded 70% or 100% if you're disabled of the fee that you pay. That's how the social, like the NHS system, works there. So if you weren't happy with that diagnosis, or just you didn't like that doctor, you could go and find somebody else. And I think the English system means if you question the doctor, you might get struck off. That's people's greatest fear. So you just go, yes, okay. And there hasn't been that training for people to be discerning of the information that they're given. So they trust people in the health profession implicitly, and that's not good. I was a friend had some issues and had to go to the doctor because she has asthma, and a whole bunch of issues had gone on and needing some medication, but he was a new doctor, and she said, I need these particular tablets, and he put her on the basic, because he's a young doctor, and so he wouldn't listen to her, and she knows her body better. And it gets very difficult that you've got to jump through these hoops to get the service that you need. So it's the shift needs to happen both sides. Clients or patients need to be able to assert themselves and say, no, this is what's right and needs to happen. And on the other hand, the medical profession also needs to find out more. In 5 minutes, you can't find out what's really going on in someone's life and symptoms. So it takes a bit of digging. So my sessions take 2 hours, because I have to find out everything and how everything is connected and what's mirroring what. So like with a back problem, it might be to do with support. That people not, when did it start? Oh, it was maybe when you divorced. Okay, so that's an indication that there's not that support system around you. Where can you find the support that you need? And putting those systems in place. And yes, doing things like Pilates and exercising and all of that helps. But if you've not got that last element, that's the mind bit, then you could still find that forever you've got this issue. So
I've got a friend who's a personal trainer, and he's just started getting he's just become trained in mental health, because he was finding that people were going to him for training sessions, but it was the mind that was a problem, and they were trying to kind of rid themselves of whatever was going on through the body, beating a punch bag, or running, whatever they were doing. So the mental health side of things. And there's an awful lot of talk now about mental health, and we should be open and transparent and all the rest of it, but there's no support out there in the medical world. I know somebody who has a diagnosis, which I won't go into now, but the treatment is 3.5-year wait for treatment for this condition. And now, how can that be right? So at one level, they're encouraged to speak out, and then when they do, there's no support, there's no backup. I mean, it disgusts me. It makes me really cross. But there are people like you around that that we don't know about, which is why, you know, I'm hoping through my program and what I do on my Facebook group is raising awareness that there's so much help out there if only people, you know, reach out and say I need help. And with all the connections that we've all got, we can't all be experts in everything, but there's lots of us around that can help, you know, signpost people to the right person.
Yeah.
You say is absolutely right on both sides. I'm encouraged. There are some young doctors up and coming now. So Dr. Rupi Onju, the Doctor's Kitchen, he's a young guy who's actually introduced into a university, a medical training school, a kitchen, teaching doctors now as part of their training about nutrition and cooking. And Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, who was on the EMT program, and his approach to wellness. So there are these doctors coming up and about. So it is encouraging, but I'm not sure in my lifetime it's going to be exactly as I would like to see it. But
slow progress.
We can forever hope. So when you were doing your nursing, you had to choose a thesis, and you chose cancer and psychology, which is an interesting mix. Why did you choose that, and what were your findings when you did your studies?
Well, my grandfather had died of cancer. I was 11, and that's when I found out he died. The next morning I woke up and I knew I wanted to train as a nurse. That was my little moment. And I thought I could save the world, you know, at 11, that's what you think you can do. And as I was getting through the training, and in my last year we had to do the thesis, I already had a sense that there was this body-mind connection. So I was really interested in not just the drugs that are given, but what's the support around it. And I'd had a dream when I was skiing that a shark had bitten my foot off. And I could feel this pain. And it's like that state where you're half asleep and half awake. So you have a sense of what's going on, but you're not quite aware that you're awake yet. And I was thinking, oh, this is really painful. A shark's bitten my foot. And then I thought, hang on a minute. We're skiing. There are no sharks on the mountains. And I thought, so why have I got this pain in my foot? And it was really painful. I thought, so I must still have my foot. So if I move my foot, and as I moved my foot, the pain went. And it was like, so my mind created that pain because it thought it had been bitten by a shark.
Wow.
So I was about 15 then. So that was there. So I knew there was this connection. So I thought, great, rather than just study loads of more drugs and be on the ward, that was a theme that I could use. And there'd been a book published about psychology and stress, written by the Simontons, which I'm not sure is around anymore. And they talked about the different stresses that we have in our lives, and how that all this research they'd done is all the people who'd had cancer had umpteen of these stresses and not necessarily the support to be able to deal with it. So moving house, getting divorced, grief, your loss, but also positive things like getting married, because that's also letting go of an old part of you and having to create a you that's now part of a unit. And it might mean a change of job, and that might also mean moving house. So multiple stresses. And what I found sort of difficult to deal with was the lack of honesty and clear communication with the patients, that they weren't telling the patients that they had cancer, so people couldn't complete processes that they really needed to complete and know. I mean, we're talking in the 80s, so things have moved on. And I did some study with Elisabeth KublerRoss, and although she's misquoted about the stages of grief, they're not stages of grief, they're stages of dying. And then I did, because I had some trauma, I did her life, death and transition workshops and her safe harbors workshop. And that really helped me to understand that aspect of what's going on in the mind, being honest and having clear communication, and being able to, when you have that, to be able to then do your grieving. Because what she found was that it was the nurses who were losing the patients. It wasn't just the families who were grieving. It was the nurses. And that's how she'd written the book for nurses and did the workshops for the nurses, which then led to realizing actually everybody's dealing with this, and we're not processing information very well. We don't have tools and strategies to do that. So that is part of some of the things that I teach people. And I have a 20 steps to beat stress, sort of areas to look at in your life. And it starts with sleep. So the first one is you must get sleep, because of this whole REM pattern. If you're not getting enough sleep, you're not getting the REM. So your brain isn't able to break down these situations that have happened, and basically that it just keeps repeating itself. So you need the sleep to be able to do that. And the last one, which comes from the Elisabeth KublerRoss workshops, is scream. And so what you were saying about the using punch bags, that exercise works to release that stress, but it's not taught in a way that's specific. So if you have that stress and you're punching the punch bag, it just releases the physical stuff. It doesn't release the mental stuff. But if you're thinking about the thing that is particularly an issue, it makes it so much more powerful. And I had an incident where our bikes got stolen from the side of our house. And I'd seen the teenagers who'd done it. There were 4 of them. And I had it in my mind. I kept seeing the picture of them as I'd looked through the window when I saw the light was on and could hear this noise. My husband was saying, but it's fine. You know, we're safe. The house is safe. It's just the bikes. We can replace the bikes. But I was still having that image. And I went to a exercise class, and I was thinking, oh, yeah. I think it was Zumba. And I was thinking, oh, yeah. And then after, I thought there was a punch bag in the corner, and I thought, I know what I need to do. But that's only because I've done this training that I know. So I put the gloves on, and I was picturing myself punching them. I didn't want to harm them physically, but I needed to release it. And that was it. Not had that image again, because I'd connected the physical action to the memory. And so that releases it. So although exercise is good, it's much more powerful if it's done in connection with the memory or the trauma or the stress that you're wanting to release, as opposed to, oh, I need to do 50, and all you're thinking about is, oh, what music shall I put on next? And you just run for the sake of running.
Yeah. We talk a lot now about mindful, don't we? Mindful exercise, mindful movement, mindful, whatever. Yeah. You've referred a few times to the REM sleep. So for the listeners' benefit, what do you mean by the REM sleep?
REM stands for repetitive eye movement. And what happens in our sleep cycle is we go through different stages. So alpha, beta, and when we're dreaming, we go through this cycle called repetitive eye movement, because what they notice is that the eyes are moving when we're in this particular sleep cycle. And there was a study done where, although people were getting sleep, they woke people up at the point at which they were going into REM cycle. And so they were doing studies on dreams and the effects of dreams. And they had to stop the study short. They cut it short because they found people were becoming dangerously psychotic And they thought, wow, that's what this part of the sleep does. And the eye movements are obviously moving because they're tapping into the part of the brain where that information gets stored. And in a technique called NLP, for neuro-linguistic programming, they use this, and it's often said about, oh, you can tell somebody who's lying because of where they're looking. So that's, if you're remembering something that's happened, you will tend to look top left. And if you're inventing something, then you will, if you're like planning, you will look top right. Or if it's something that's emotional, you look in somewhere else. So depending on where your memory is, so usually it's on you're looking left, so the memory is on the left side. So where that memory is where the eyes will go. So I can use that in the EMDR and also IEMT, integral eye movement therapy, which uses the eye movements as well, to tap into that aspect of our brain function with what's happening with the eyes.
Does the memory looking sort of up left or forward up right, does it matter if you're left or right-handed, or is it always memory left and forward right?
In certain circumstances in IEMT, they say it makes a difference. I'm not sure if it does in NLP or not. Because although I use some of the basic principles, I'm not trained in NLP. So, but in IEMT, they say that there will be, if you ask people, are they right-handed or left-handed, because some of those things that you will be looking for may be reversed if they're left-handed. So then you just need to double check, are they actually making it up? So you need to ask different questions. Are they making it up? Are they trying to create the future rather than not wanting to go back to what was it actually like? Have they got that memory? So we use it, is that memory vivid? Or how vivid is the memory, and what's the emotion attached to that memory? And then we effectively use the word, we process that event and unravel it.
So again, it's looking at the whole thing, isn't it? It's looking at the whole picture and within context and so on.
Yeah.
You mentioned my favourite, Elisabeth Kubler-Ross, a few times, and I've often, and I've written about the transition curve. And as you say, she's misquoted. All of these special people get misquoted over the years, don't they, in some way or another? But the concept of the transition curve interests me. Talk us through your experience with I call it the transition curve. Some people call it the grief or the grieving curve or the death curve or acceptance curve. There's lots of different names for it. But talk us through how you use that, or what's your experience?
Well, I was saying earlier that the first step on the 20 steps of de-stress, the first one is sleep. The last one is scream. And what they do is actually being able to verbalize and enact that process. And that's the part of the curb, is the denial. So it's not happening, and so you may feel very, very angry at one point about, why is God doing this to me, and it's not fair. I've never smoked, never drunk, and why am I getting this? So that's one of the things that I learnt in her workshop, is to use I've sort of changed it slightly, but you use a rolled up tea towel and you actually beat the bed and vocalize what it is that you're experiencing, what is it that you're angry about. So it might be, oh, I hate my mother for not accepting that I didn't want to do such and such, and I didn't want to go to that particular school and they forced me and this is why this happened, letting all of that out. And so that can be used when people are going through this curve in the denial is very much education, because they may not understand what's happening and they don't want to face it and complete things that they feel they're not going to be able to do. So how can they right now, what is it that they can do in order to be able to be at peace with the fact that they're not going to be able to do that? Or sometimes it's just they wanted to say sorry to somebody, that they've done something and they didn't want it to be that way, and there's been a huge family rift. What can they do right now to make amends to that while there's still time? And if it's somebody who's died and they wanted to apologize to their mother and now they're dying, work can be put in place, and so that process can be used, and understanding where people are at. If they're in denial, then you need to sort of accept that that's where they're at and watch for, okay, now they're accepting, now they're wanting the help. So not implementing certain strategies at a time that some people they're just not listening. Then they're in that zone. Yeah. So when they're angry, you just need to let that anger go, to let them dissipate that and not take it personally. They're not necessarily angry at you. They're just feeling anger. And so knowing what's happening can help. If the family understand it, can help the ways that you're communicating with, if you're a therapist, with the client or with the patient, and with the family where they're at. And of course, because it's been not thinking necessarily it's the patient, it's the person who's dying who's going through that, but also now that in grief there's also some stages. I think that's why it's got confused. Also looking at, well, where are people at? Are they able to take in this piece of information? And in IEMT, there's this whole, as I was saying, a pattern of chronicity where, they are stuck. It's the outside world that's to blame. Then they're not responsible for it. They're not ready to take responsibility. So you need to educate to help them see. But by saying that it's outside, how does that help you cope with it now? And when they go, well, it doesn't. Okay, well, then what can we do instead? And you've probably come across Byron Katie.
Yes.
Yeah, and the shoulding. They should do this and they should do that. Okay, so where are you? What are the things? That's the mirror. That if they should be doing that, what is it that you should be doing right now that you're not doing, that you could be doing? And so again, it's all that language. When we see the language that we're using and how that's effectively showing what's going on, then that can be used to guide to something better, to better health and better systems and better patterns and better language. Then, okay. So with children, it's like, if you don't run in the swimming pool, don't run. Actually, your brain can't. It's the program. It can't not do something. It has to know what run is. And once it knows what run is, then it'll do that before it has any concept of what might be the opposite. Well, the opposite of running might be walking, skipping, hopping. So you have to be clear of what outcome you want. That's that whole copy paste thing. to get the result that you desire, rather than, well, I don't want to be ill. Well, what does health look like then? And again, that's different for everyone. Not everybody wants to run a marathon. Not everybody wants to be, Superman. So for me, it's just being able to do Pilates and cycle and swim. And some people don't just even want to do that. For them, just being healthy is getting through the year without getting a cold. That would be healthy. And that's the thing. Everybody's got their own standard, their own vision of what that means. And it's creating that specifically to then be able to reach that stage.
Exactly.
Knowing where you're at. If I say you don't want to go to London, you could go anywhere in the world. Okay, so now if you want to go to London, how are you going to get there? People say, well, I'll drive. But you're in New York. So you need to know where you're going. You also need to know where you're starting from to be able to get that path that's very clear between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the Elisabeth KublerRoss curve comes in for me, because you need to know, as you say, where you're at in that curve. Are you at the point of acceptance? Are you at the point of denying? So, for example, I first came across it when I was doing some big corporate work. I used to do transformational change projects in organisations. So where is the? I've had to make people redundant, as part of the project. So that's when I first came across this curve. Or some people, why is it some people go straight to acceptance? Oh, well, okay, well, I'm being made redundant. Actually, I'm really happy about that, because I can't stand my job anyway, and I'm going to get some money and I can go off and do what I've always wanted to do. So they've gone straight to acceptance, whereas other people are in denial. Oh, no, it can't be. This is my whole life. What am I going to do? Some people get angry. Some people get emotional and sad. So on that curve, there's all kinds of emotions. So, but you're starting from denial, and then you're getting to acceptance. And again, with health, so many people go straight to when they're given the diagnosis, denial, anger, all the emotions that come up, and until they get to the point of acceptance, they can then get on with healing. So there's all this roller coaster in between. So I've come across it in the corporate setting with in a work context, but latterly with the health. And people say to me, how can, because I've had cancer 4 times, 4 different versions. And this year I'm celebrating 5 years, though they gave me a year to live in 2015. So but I went straight from, okay, shit's happened, I've got to get out of it now, straight to acceptance. What do I do? Show me what I need to do. And I dived straight in, got on with what I needed to do, and came out in 14 weeks from a stage 4 diagnosis. And then other people will just be wallowing. They'll be catastrophizing, to use your word earlier on. Oh my God, it's awful. I've got this, I've got that. And I've come to learn over the years, supporting people, that not everybody wants to get better. Not everybody wants to heal. And that's fine. That's perfectly fine. So I've had to learn not to stamp my enthusiasm and my over-optimism on other people. Where they're at is fine for them. I cajole them and support them as best I can do, but recognizing where they are on the curve, and the clarity of the mind-body connection. So having people like you as a resource that I can send people to is absolutely fabulous. So awesome. I take my hat off to you, and the work that you do is brilliant.
I'm glad to hear that. But that was why I moved away from massage, because I realized that was still those people that didn't necessarily really want to get better. I was still treating them month after month. And I say it was great for the bank balance, but it did nothing for my soul at all. It was heartbreaking. What I wanted to do was really help people get well and stay well. So that's why I looked at other forms of other therapies, but also educating people into, this is what's happening. This is what you can do for those who are ready. And now I really sort of, what we go in marketing is like, what's your ideal type client and your avatar and all this fancy language. Actually, who are the people that you can really help that I'm going to make the biggest difference with. And they're people who are ready, who've gone through the mill, they've had this, they've had that, they've seen all the people they can think on, they're still not well. Okay, right, let's look at it. Let's start right from the beginning again. And take people where they're at and teach them what's happening, not just pump another therapy into them. You know, a bit of Reiki here and a bit of remotherapy and a bit of a massage and
I wish people could find
holistically.
Wish they could find us sooner, because as you say, they go through all the, you know, the led by the nose by the medics, all this drug, that drug, every which way. And people, when people say to me that they're having chemotherapy, I just say to them, do your research, please do your research. And all I would say is, why would you have chemotherapy? Chemotherapy causes cancer, so why would you give chemotherapy that causes cancer to somebody that's got cancer? It does not add up to me in job. Having said that, I had a teeny weeny bit of chemo for my stage 4 cancer because it was lymph cancer, and lymph and blood cancers do react better to chemo, but I had it on my terms, my amount. I got conned into having an extra one that has left me with symptoms that I live with daily, but I had less than half of what was recommended. But I chose it because on balance, the type of cancer that I had, most cancers, and the research is out there, I'm not making this up, there's plenty of there's articles all about this, just for listeners' benefit, and I think I'm, you know, going off on a tangent here. Chemotherapy only works in 2 to 3% of cases, whereas blood and lymph cancer, it works in 81% of cases. So on balance, with all the natural things I was doing to help myself, cannabis oil and oxygen therapy and goodness knows what, I've kind of calculated that I would have a much better chance. But and that's the reason why I've now recently trained as a biohacker. So we were saying earlier on about people get to see a specialist and a different specialist, and they get all these drugs. But why do we get ill in the first place?
Yeah,
nobody looks at why we get ill in the first place. So the work that you do unravels and gets to the deep stuff, which is absolutely fabulous. I'm looking at it from the biohacking is about hacking into the biological systems of the body. And it's very, very simple. You know, there's only 5 things you need to look at to keep well. And sleep is a big one. Grounding is a big one. Things that don't cost any money. You know, people think you've got to spend a fortune and go off to clinics all over the world and this, that and the other. Just stand still. Just look at what's going on. But the mind-body connection to me is the biggest thing. And that's the thing that for people I support, if they haven't got that mind-body connection, if they don't get it, then they don't recover so well, or at all. I've seen people scare themselves to death, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and it's the education. It's not coming into. It's not mainstream. It's still, well, take that tablet and this will happen. You're very. We know as children what is right for us or not. We sense it and we say no. But our parents or our teachers or, you know, other people that we think know better will say, no, this is how you do it. This is right. So we then, it's effectively, our boundary gets crossed. And so this just keeps getting repeated over and over again to the point where we don't know who we really are and what's right for us anymore. So when something big happens, it's like, oh, well, I don't know myself. I don't know what's right for me because I've never been given a chance to just be me. Yeah, sit down in a classroom, follow this system. You have to sit for hours on end. I was so lucky. I was able to choose my options. Everything I chose was as far away from a desk as I could possibly make it. So I did gymnastics, I did sports, I did drama, I did woodwork, I did sewing, anything that didn't require a book. And I realized because I'm kinesthetic, so I learn through my body and I have to move, that's how I learn. So naturally, I gravitated to options that enabled me to sit for an hour in class and do maths. Had I not had that, I have no idea. I probably would have been considered ADHD because I would have been going stir crazy because I wouldn't have been able to move around so much. And I now realize, I was lucky that I had early on. My parents just said, well, it's your life. You make those choices. You decide. You do what you want. And I had space to be able to run around and cycle as a kid. So although it took me years to actually understand what had happened, I had done those things naturally. We were able to choose our doctor and our dentist. And they weren't scarce. So if you just didn't like that dentist, you go and find another one. Try and find an NHS dentist. It's gold dust. If you can't afford to pay for them. So it's tuning. I'm helping clients to tune themselves to what is right for them. And that is so hard. And suddenly they go, oh, yeah. So I said to my clients, no, I'm not going to tell you when you need to come because only you know that. Part of the training is not for me to tell you how much my sessions cost, how often you need to come, what we're going to do. You're going to give me that information. And people go, how can you run a business like that? Well, it's the only way I can, because otherwise I'd be going against the very thing that I'm saying is what helps people.
Yeah, brilliant. I love it. Absolutely love it. I've made a note here. I've made so many notes on this piece of paper now. I've lost the one that I wanted to mention now. Anyway, it's been lovely, absolutely gorgeous speaking with you, Julie, and it's always nice to kind of get to know the person rather than, Facebook posts here, there and everywhere. There's an awful lot behind all of us, and
there is.
Your background, your experience. I know what I was going to say. 34 is about the age, in my experience, that people get to know who they are. And
right.
Following intuition is really, really, really important for people of whatever's going on in their life. Our intuition is always the thing that's right, isn't it? Like you were saying, when you're a child, you know what's right and what's wrong as a child, but you get talked out a bit by adults who you look up to and respect, and you think they know better. But following your intuition,
then you get confused, and then you lose track of that. There was a book called The Gift of Fear, where this policeman was interviewing women who'd escaped rape or something like that, some violence, and he was saying it would be the women who would tell them how to not let it happen in the future. And it was always about, they knew before it happened that there was something wrong, but they didn't trust their gut reaction. They didn't listen to their instinct. Of course, now there's a lot of research about the gut bacteria and how that's actually influencing the information that's going on in the brain.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah,
it's all out there.
It is, yeah. I'm doing a course on that at the moment, the gut-brain health connection, learning all about that's fascinating. So how do people get hold of you, Julie?
I've got a website called Body Mind Coaching, through email, or I've got a Facebook page, and there's a link from my website onto my Facebook page and LinkedIn profile. They're my main platforms, but I tend to respond quite well to emails. I'm a bit old-fashioned. I haven't caught up with all this multi-social media stuff.
Yes, yeah. My PA does that for me. It's much easier to have a young person deal with all that kind of thing.
They know what they're doing, yeah.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So bodymindcoaching.co.uk.
Yes.
.co.uk. Okay, fantastic.
And I do although I do face-to-face, I also work over Skype, so it's not just limited to the UK.
Okay, brilliant. 2 songs I ask people to choose, and you've chosen Want to Break Free by Queen.
Yep.
And Edith Piaf, Je ne regrette rien. So why did you choose those?
As a child, I guess I felt I was in the wrong place, because although I was British, I was born in Belgium, and I did have this sense that I wanted to break free. It was just, get me out of here. I don't belong here. And I think it's this identity and this feeling of, when you break free, it's the butterfly analogy. When you get out of the cocoon and you live your life on your terms, it is so much easier, because you get into flow and you everything starts to fall into place. It's when you're tired and restricted in this little cocoon, things become difficult. And although it means you're having to go against the tide and the flow of, oh, you've got to celebrate Christmas and you've got to do all of this, and you must, like you say, oh, you got to go down chemotherapy. You need that. You do need that strength to be able to do that. But I just so wanted to break free. So yeah. And Edith Piaf, Je ne regrette rien, is because despite all the traumas, I had some, if one could call it mild, sexual abuse and emotional abuse, and not from my parents. So I think that's why I coped with it quite well. I had a stable home. All of those things that happened, I never let that get in the way. I knew what I was wanting to do, and I don't regret those things happening, and what's happened has happened. And I see they're all lessons. It's what helps me be able to be connected to my clients and understand, yep, I recognize that feeling. Yes, and it's not having sympathy for them, but I can use language that helps them go, yeah, I've been there, and these are the tools that helped me. If they helped me, they might also be able to help you. So all of those dramas were there as lessons, and so I don't regret anything. And that connects me to the fact that I was a natural French speaker until I was about 23. I came to England when I was 21, and although I spoke English, I didn't really read and write, so I had a bit of catching up to do. But because my parents spoke English, that's why I don't really speak with much of an accent. So yeah, I thought, oh yeah, yes, I've got to put a bit of French in there somewhere. I haven't lost it all, even though I wanted to leave. I love the fact that I can speak 2 languages. It trains the brain in a different way, and has that ability to help people see things differently, and you understand language in a completely different way. So
fantastic. And you do what you do with such compassion and empathy, because you've been there, done it, got the t-shirt
like you.
and all that. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
You've been there, you've done your research, you've understand what it does, how it works, what works for you, and how it might help others. So
fantastic. Well, Julie Nicholls from bodymindcoaching.co.uk, thank you very much. Here are your songs, and listeners, tune in next Tuesday, and also remember we have a replay on Saturdays at 11 o'clock. So if you didn't catch everything and manage to make notes today, you can listen to Julie again on Saturday at 11 o'clock. Take care. Bye for now. Yes, Julie, sorry, do you want to say
I was just going to say a note that it's body-mind-coaching.co.uk
right.
for the website. Yeah.
Okay. Body-mind-coaching.co.uk.
Coaching.co.uk.
Fabulous.
Thank you very much, Elaine.
Thank you, Julie.